Welcome to CMR Interviews by Jason Shapiro. In today's episode, Jason Shapiro interviews Annie Duke. To find out about Jason, visit www.crowdedmarketreport.com. And to learn more about Annie Duke, visit her website www.annieduke.com and subscribe to her Substack newsletter.
All right, hello, this is Jason Shapiro with CrowdedMarketReport.com, and today I am really happy and really honored to say that we have gotten Annie Duke to join us for a conversation. And I would say, as a background, if you don't know who Annie Duke is, then you're probably in the wrong place. But let's just say how I knew her was, she was a very successful poker player, and like many people, after the whole sort of Chris Moneymaker blow up in poker, I started to watch a lot of poker, and Annie was one of the stars of the show. And I would have to say that one of my favorite, if not my favorite moment in all of those TV shows of poker was when she won the Tournament of Champions. And I just thought it was so good because not only was it a woman that kicked ass against all these completely, egotistical men, but, and we're talking about this was against the greatest poker players alive. I'm just looking at it. You had Helmuth on there. You had Howard Lederer, who I think is your brother, right?
That's true.
Johnny Chan, Greg Raymer, Doyle Brunson, Daniel Negreanu. I mean, Phil Ivey. These are
Chip Reese,
right? I mean, these are, these are the people, and she beat them all. But what was even better than that to me was I always thought when she won, I still remember this, and I haven't seen this in 15 years. She was the joy on her face when she won on TV was just amazing, because you see these guys win a lot of these tournaments, and like their attitude a lot of time is like, oh, I was supposed to win, what am I going to be happy about? I'm the best poker player in the world. Whereas with her, it was like her face just lit up. I still remember it. It was so great, and it just shows how Annie wears her heart on her sleeve, and I love that shit. So anyway, that's how I knew Annie. What I didn't know until I read her book, somebody actually suggested her book to me a while ago, 6 months ago, and I read it. And what I didn't know was she is just a incredibly intelligent person, and an incredibly educated person. She was maybe a month away from getting a PhD in cognitive behavioral decision making, I guess you would call it. That sounds about right. And she knows, and then she applied that type of thought process to playing poker and becoming a successful poker player. And while I feel like I've always had sort of an instinctual feel for this type of behavioral stuff, as most people know, I'm really a behavioral person. I'm not looking at charts and fundamentals. I'm really fading math, sort of bad decision making. I've been pretty instinctual with that. Here's a person who is actually very well educated in this and can tell us these are like the real things. I've read a few books. I've read the Kahneman book, and I've done all that, but this is a person who really knows what the hell she's talking. So Annie, on that note, thank you for coming and welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm excited for the conversation.
Okay. And, there are some interviews on YouTube and whatnot of Annie that people have done specifically about her book and her books. And I would certainly suggest that people should check those out and also read her books, because what I don't want to do here is have her explain to us what's in her book. What I'd like to do is kind of cut right to the chase and have her tell us how we can use these lessons about making better decisions to become better traders. And then I have some questions that people sent us. But Annie, on that note, how do we use these lessons to become better traders?
Just take it away, right?
And I have specific questions. If you want
wait, so I just want to just like brag about something that I'm super proud of for myself.
Please.
Because you mentioned that I quit graduate school way back when, like literally ABD, like I was on the job market and decided to go play poker.
Right.
In June, I successfully defended my dissertation, and I am officially a PhD.
So now I'm sorry, we have Dr. Annie Duke on our show today.
Now I'm only saying that because I'm super proud that I went back 30 years later and actually finished the thing.
Good. You're like those NFL players that go back to school and get a degree.
Right. Exactly.
When did you officially become the doctor?
I successfully defended June 15th. My official degree date was August 4th.
Okay.
Of 2023.
Well,
just in case people are listening to this in the future, which I suppose they might.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So hit us. How do I become a better trader? How do I do this better?
Oh my gosh. Well, I say sort of broadly, separate from investing, there's only two things that determine how your life turns out. One is luck, which you have no control over. And the other is the quality of the decisions that you make. And that's it. That's it. So what we really need to do in all aspects is really get a really serious focus on the quality of your decision. And what that means is thinking really deeply about what are the things that I can do in terms of my own decision process that are going to make my decisions better. Because, people talk a lot about, I make my own luck. This is something that people say in investing, actually. I make my own luck. And it's not true. You can't make your own luck. It's impossible. You don't have any control over luck. What you can do is make decisions that change the probability of outcomes that you desire occurring. Either for the worse, make those things lower, or for the better, make those things higher. And so what we're trying to do through this focus on the decision quality is to increase the probability of good decisions happening. And you can only do that thing. One is to change to increase the knowledge that's being inputted into the decision itself. And there's different ways to do that. We can talk about that for sure. And the other is to put good process on top of it. And the reason is that when we think about the quality of the decisions and what they get addled by, one is just bias. And we can there's all sorts of biases that I'm sure that people have heard about, like sunk cost fallacy and confirmation bias and all these things. But what those really come down to is I want to feel like a consistent individual that makes good decisions and does stick. And if you kind of think about all the cognitive biases like through that lens, you actually capture a lot of the ways that our decisions go wrong. We can think about it as trying to move our own self-narrative along as opposed to trying to be accurate in our decisions. So we want to really start to think about how can we expand the different points of view that we have, like inputting into our decisions. How do we gather more knowledge and perspectives into our decisions? And then how do we put really good process around that, which not only debiases us and reduces noise in the decision process, but it also gives us a record. And this is really important in investing, that allows us to loop back and create a feedback loop where we can now look back at the decisions that we made in the past to actually examine the decision quality without sort of making it up.
Oh my God, I couldn't agree with those things more.
Okay, well, that's good. I guess our conversation is done.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, I think you talk about in terms of, okay, let's try to figure out how to make better decisions. Well, one way to do that with what we're doing is you can start to, if you do it right, start looking at the back testing your strategy, right? To see if are you doing something that is just shit to begin with, or are you doing something that maybe has some value, right? And then what that does, obviously, is it helps to determine where your risk is and how to deal with that. Like you say, there's luck, I look at like my trading, less than 50% of my trades make money, right? And so I put a trade on and hey, something comes out the next day, whatever, some bomb blew up or some central bank did something that I wasn't expecting, and I lose money. I can't control that. I don't have a direct line to the central banks, right? But it's all just a question of the risk reward of the decision. And that's what sort of back testing, I feel like, can help as one way to do it. Keeping a record, like you say. I mean, I distribute a newsletter now that was originally just my record for 22 years. Yeah. I wrote this for myself and I love it more than anything else because I get to go back and look at how wrong I was on so many things, and be like, okay, what was I thinking then? And look at me and stop thinking that you might have a chance of being right because, here's a million reasons, here's a million times when sometimes I'm right. That might've just been luck too, right? But I love the wrong things more than anything else, right? Because that's where I remind myself that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So stop thinking I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So yeah, I think what you said is everything. And then in terms of, surrounding yourself, and you talk about this in your book a lot, and it's going to lead me into some personal questions about my personal questions, but surrounding yourself with people that can help you to do this, because trying to find your own biases is very tough, right? Whereas if you surround yourself that will help you, people that can help you find your bias.
I think there's a few problems that we have with figuring out what our own gaps in our knowledge are, with figuring out, are we overconfident? Are we trying to chase, what we'd say, throw good money after bad because we don't want to turn a paper loss, realized loss, for example. The problem is that we really can't see ourselves very well from the outside looking in, right? We're looking from the inside looking out. And we can look at other people and see so very clearly that they're biased. But we don't see it in ourselves. So I think there's a few things that really go wrong in trying to get to those other perspectives and trying to find out that we're not thinking about things in the most accurate way possible. One is that we don't have a strong desire to do it. So who wants to find out that the thing you believe is wrong? right? I mean, that's a lot of pain in the short run. Of course, to be a great investor, you have to be hungry for that information. But mostly we want to believe as we're investing in the market between 2016 and 2021, that we're just genius because we made a lot of money. Yeah. Everyone's a genius in a bull market, right? So we don't actually want to find a different perspective, which is, well, do you know what beta was? Did you outperform beta, right? Were there other things that you could do even if you were generating alpha that would have allowed you to generate more? Did you take on too much risk, too little, right? So on and so forth. Like we actually really aren't that hungry for the information, because it's like we have a win, a psychological win, and who wants to give that win up? So that doesn't feel very good. When we're really hungry to look for alternative explanations is actually when we lose, because when we lose, that's very painful, and so we like to look at things like I couldn't have foreseen it. So we love explanations like that when things don't go well, but we have to be equally willing to look for those information. We have to be equally willing to look for those explanations, regardless of whether we won or lost, and we're not naturally kind of wired that way. So I think that's problem number one. What falls out of problem number one is that we tend to speak in a way that reduces the opportunity for us to be wrong, and it also reduces the opportunity for people to actually disagree with us. So let me divide that into two categories. So when we say something like, this was an example from a podcast I just did, inflation, I believe inflation will be transient. What does transient mean? If there's still inflation in a year, am I wrong?
Right.
Because you don't know what transient means. It depends.
Everything's transient. You get enough time.
Everything's transient. Right. So I'm saying something that sounds very deep, right? It's transient, and then we could throw in something like it's likely to be transient, right? Yeah. So we hear statements like that from pundits all the time. If you go and listen to CNBC, right, you'll hear people making statements like this a lot. And the thing is, how can they possibly be wrong?
No, that's right.
Right. But tell me the meeting that you've ever had where people aren't slinging around words like, I think it's really likely, or this is going to happen more often than not. And I don't know what those things mean. Neither does the person. Like, they have definitions that are like really broad target areas. And what it allows you to do is that slippery, slidey, out of accountability for any outcome that might occur, because likely could mean any, right? So I think that there's a lot of the way that we communicate that protects us from that blow to our self-narrative that comes from being wrong, because the words we're using kind of don't allow us to be wrong, if that makes sense. So I think, that's one thing that falls out of that. The other thing that falls out of this, like, I don't want my self-narrative to be pierced, is that we tend to really love to seek other people's opinion after they've already heard our own. So I'm not going to go to you and say, like, I don't know, I'll just pick a show that I'm watching lately, like Welcome to Wrexham. So I've been watching that show. I like it. I'm not going to go to you and say, what do you think of that show? That's like weird and unnatural, right? I'm going to say, oh, I've really been enjoying this show. Like, I love Welcome to Wrexham. I think it's fun to follow the team, and like, what do you think of the show? And the fact is that when we do that, I'm not going to get a particularly good answer from you. And that's true whether we're talking about a TV show or an investment that we're thinking about or anything else, right? Like, how am I going to get a good answer from you when you already know my opinion? Because I put you in a very bad situation where if you disagree with me, I'm now making you actually disagree with me, like, to my face. So we tend to have conversations in groups because it creates the appearance of more than there actually is. And I think that's a humongous, I think it's a humongous problem for decision quality. I can't remember what the second point I made was, but I'm sure we'll come back to it. But
I mean, that right there, and there's just so many things that you say in every 4 sentences. I'm trying to take notes because I wanted to ask so many questions on the topic, but that right there is a problem for me because I'm looking for mass consensus and I'm looking to fade mass consensus. So trying to develop mass consensus can be difficult because it's like you say, if I say to people, hey, I'm super bearish, what are you? Right. Well, then that's not helping me develop mass consensus, right? It's helping me actually create mass consensus, right?
Right. Then you're going to create false signal.
Right.
And,
so that's
and I think it's a very unnatural way to talk to people. We want people to agree with us, so we'll signal what we believe in advance. Maybe we think that what we believe is actually important data, right? That it's actual data. But if we're trying to get out of our own way, right? If we're trying to get to somebody else's opinion, then this is the key. I need to actually find out what you think, independent of what I think. Okay, so one thing that's not going to help is to use words like likely, because likely to me might mean 30% and likely to you may mean 60%. And we both agree that it's likely, but we actually really, really disagree with each other, right? So we have to stop using words like that. But the other thing is that we really have to stop offering our opinion first. So like in a group setting, how do you do that? Figure out what are the subjective judgments that you're trying to get from the group, and then have them do those independent before you ever discuss. Because now, if you think about it, if I say, hold on a second, like I'm not going to tell you what I think about Welcome to Wrexham. I'm using obviously a silly example. Let's both take out a piece of paper and write down what we think of the show. You're not disagreeing with me now because you don't know what my opinion is. We may end up in a state of disagreement, which is good because then we find out we have something to talk about. Or we may end up in a state of agreement, but I'm not forcing you to disagree with me because you don't know what I think first. And then I'm just going to get a much better opinion from you. And that's actually going to allow me to get to what we would call the outside view, which is the world from outside of my own perspective. And we cannot be good decision makers without that. That is like the biggest key is I have to be able to see how other people in the world view the situation that I'm looking at. Because the way that I view it is going to be biased. The way that somebody else views it is going to be biased as well, but it's going to be a different bias than my own. And that's really, and if I can get a bunch of different independent perspectives, I'm much more likely to find the truth in there.
I love it. I mean, I without a doubt have found, what I have ended up doing is rely on certain data set. Like I say, if I'm trying to fade mass consensus, right? Well, I've relied on certain data sets that are independent of opinion. It's just data, right? That says, hey, this is where people are super long, or this is where people are super short. Because I find clearly when I'm trying to find out whether people are super bullish or super bearish something, my bias of interpreting that data becomes bad. If I want to be bearish, then I can go around and say, oh, look at how bullish all these are. They really bullish, or is that really just what I'm seeing?
Right.
And that has hurt me in the past, right? Like I say, once in a while it ends up being good, once in a while it ends up being right, but it doesn't help me, right, overall.
Right.
So I tend to rely just strictly on data, right, which is not perfect data. I mean, trying to figure out the perfect data, as we know, is impossible, but I try to rely strictly on data rather than that thing, because I know that my bias is going to get in the way of that thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I would add on to that a caution,
Please.
Which is that data is not true. Data is an input into truth, into the way that you're supposed to model that data. And there's all sorts of ways that we can model data that will be that will support our bias.
Yes.
And make us actually much more confident in our conclusions than we would be if we have the data. So look, I'm a huge fan of data. Every company that I consult for, every firm that I consult for has a data analyst. I work very closely with them. I'm a big fan of answering difficult questions with data. I think it's one of the things that I actually offer as a service. But what I find is that it's hard. You have to be very careful about how is it that you're looking at this data and interpreting it in a way that leads you to a wrong conclusion, and generally leads you to a conclusion that you're trying to get to.
Yeah, bad back testing.
Right. So we can think about all sorts of different problems, right? Like the sample size is small. So you're actually looking at something that maybe we would want to label as a trend to watch, but it actually fits with what our narrative is. So in a case where it doesn't fit with our narrative, we'll say that's a trend to watch. But in a case where it does, we're like, look, the data says it's true, right? Even though in both cases you have a small sample size. So that might be something. You might have like a sampling bias. The worst one of that would be like cherry picking data. But an example I'll give you, which was a real one that happened, was there was a study that showed that kids who ate breakfast did better in school. And so, of course, all the journalists are recommending that you feed your kids breakfast, they'll do better in school. But there was a sampling bias, which is that rich kids eat breakfast,
right.
And they also do better in school. Right. So it's not necessarily a causal relationship, but you can see why people started to do that, because it was a story that made sense. Right. But the
correlation is not causation, as they say.
That is right. Correlation is not causation. So that would be like a sampling problem. people aren't good at looking for natural control groups. So an example I would give of that is maybe you're hiring people and you say, gosh, the top performers in the company that I've hired all seem to score very high on conscientiousness on the big 5 or something, right? Well, maybe so, but that doesn't mean that you should hire specifically for that trait, because you have to ask, what about all the rest of the people who are quite bad? So we would want to ask that question too, right? And I think that there's just a whole bunch of things that have to do with wisdom around data, where we just have to have this caution around it, which is data is amazing and it can really inform a decision, but there are cases where no data is better than data if you're interpreting the data to support your own bias, right? Because your confidence in your conclusion is going to be so much higher.
Just so funny. You're gathering data to get rid of your bias, but then the data that you're gathering, you're still using your bias to get to the conclusion.
To interpret the data. That's exactly right. And I see it all the time with people that I consult with, where they'll come to me very excited with data insight. And oftentimes I'm just poking a hole into the balloon and sort of deflating it.
Right.
For the reason that this is so hard. These are very smart people. They're trying to find the truth. They're totally willing to be wrong. But when you see something in the data that is supporting a belief that you already have, that is total, stranger danger, right? Like, oh my God. And I think that that's something that we need to build into our decision process, is like a checklist of what are the things that we're asking about that are going to help us to understand whether this is truth or not. And I don't think we're very good at it.
Awesome. I want to, we went out to our people and asked them to give us some questions, but
okay.
I'm going to be selfish first because I need therapy, and I think you can probably help me with it.
I don't know. I'm not
you have to understand that, and you don't understand because you don't know me, but I am 100%, all I do is take opposite sides of people. That's all because I believe.
I like that you're betting against them.
That's all I'm doing. Yeah. And because I believe so strongly in what you're talking about, that all these people have these behavioral biases and therefore are leading to poor decisions, my chances of making money by going opposite them is better than anything else I could come up with that I could do. And that's all I do, because all I'm trying to do is make money, right? Okay. So I come from just an incredible, almost dysfunctional place of that. Okay. So like in your book, you talk about this person, the Greek, right? That played poker with you and that lost money consistently. And lost money consistently, right? And from what I could tell, there were 2 reasons that he lost money consistently. One, his process was bad to begin with, right? Which you would know as a poker player that his process is flawed to begin with and is destined to lose money, right? And 2, he never wanted to acknowledge that. Every time he lost money, it was because of bad luck. And every time he happened to make money, it was because he was so smart and his process was so smart. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say the second thing is the more important one.
Okay. So
it was so this is what I said, right? When I said, like, if you think about a lot of the problems that we have as decision makers, they're driven from a desire to have a positive self-narrative. So here's the problem. If you lose a hand because you made bad decisions, that's not good for your self-narrative. Okay, so how do we actually deal with that, right? Like, I lost a hand. I don't want to believe I'm a bad maker. That would be really bad for my self-narrative. So therefore, it must have been due to luck. Okay,
but that's going to be part 2 of my question. Part 1 of my question, completely selfish. If you recognize this in a person, here's a person that from everything that I know, and also from the proof of the data, is going to lose money playing poker, right? Why should I even play poker? Why can't I make a deal with the people on the table? Whatever this guy makes, I'll pay. And whatever he loses, you pay me. Would you make that deal?
Oh, yeah. No, people do that all the time. You can do that. You can cross book.
You can.
Yeah. So
and wouldn't that be a much easier way to make money playing poker, rather than having to sit there and make all these difficult decisions and get into your own mind and spend all these hours? Just be like, look, I can recognize that this person has essentially.
Sure. I mean, I think most people enjoy the process of playing. I mean, I retired in 2012, but when I played poker, I think it was fun it was definitely fun to play. But people did do that. So there were 2 different types of crossbook. One might be, whatever this guy wins, I'll pay you. Whatever he loses, you pay me. But then you could also take the difference of one person's winnings versus losing. So that was a bigger bet, obviously, that you were making. There's more volatility there since you're betting both sides of it.
Right.
But people would do that all the time. You could book somebody, you could cross book them. So I could say, I'm going to take Josh against Annie, and you have to pay me the difference, for example. So that's a pretty big bet. I could say, I'm just going to short Josh.
Right.
Whatever he loses, you got,
I love that. I mean, that's essentially what I do.
Whatever he wins, I have to pay you.
Yeah. I understand that people enjoy the process, and I feel it's the same exact thing in trading. They enjoy the process of trading, so they do it.
Right.
Me, if I could just, I try, I can't, I don't have that option, but I try to do that. I try to find what they're doing and just cross book them. Right. That's what I'm trying to do. Now, the problem is now I have to deal with my own bad psychology of, my own whatever and my own discipline to make sure that I'm cross booking them correctly. Right. But that's essentially what I do, right? So the other problem I have with all this thinking is my next question on this is, it's just like trading and it's just like poker. The people keep saying, oh, it's just bad luck when I lose. I'm smart when I win. But you have a P&L, right? Be it poker, be it trading.
People are so good at ignoring that, though.
That's what it just amazes me, because you have a P&L. This isn't like opinions, right? Here it is. You talk about data. There's no lying in P&L data, right? You can make it up and be like, oh, well, I made this month and okay, but after a long enough time.
This is where accountability. So I think that's such a good question. So we can think about a couple of problems here in terms of people's psychology and relational. One thing is what's the length of the feedback? So the slower the capital, let's take venture, for example, the more that you can fool yourself into thinking you're great when you're not.
Right.
Because, you invested in Uber however long ago, and then your whole portfolio isn't going to realize for like another 10 years. And so you can be like, Howard Marks says, it's filled with a bunch of people who've won one time in a row.
Yes.
Right. So, I think that's, when you get into these very, very long feedback loop situations, particularly when there's power law involved, right, where there's very, very few winners, it's very easy to sort of ignore the P&L and blame everything on luck and sort of take credit for good stuff and all of that, right? But even in something like poker, which has a really fast feedback loop, in the end, you're only accountable to your own pocketbook. So it's very, one thing that I found was people were really good at reporting their wins and forgetting their losses. So I would have people come up to me and be like, I win 95% of the time I play. And I'm thinking, do you want to book that? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
no, and you make $1 those 95% and you lose 1,000 the other 5%. So what good?
Well, they also weren't winning 95% of the time to play. Like, that's completely impossible. Even if you're playing really low vol poker, it's just not going to happen.
No.
So, but remember that their P&L is private, right? So they don't have to show it to anybody.
Yeah, but it hurts.
Not as much as feeling like you're bad at what you do.
Really? That's what I don't get. Like, that's my problem right there. I have no problem being wrong. I love it because that's where I learn, right?
Yeah.
Where I have a problem is losing money. People. I'm a money manager, and it's not private because I manage money for other people. But
so
I got a problem losing money.
Right. So that's a big difference, right? So if we're talking about someone who's day trading for themselves or playing poker for themselves, you can live in the luck excuse for a really long time, even as you're looking at your own P&L that might be losing. It's so easy to say, I'm just on a bad run.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's like maybe that bad run is 10 years, but you can say it.
It's gonna hurt, man. Like, you know what I mean? I can't pay my bills
but
anymore.
Again, it doesn't hurt as well. Actually, let me say this. The reason why you can say I've been on a bad run for 5 years or whatever, I've been on a bad run is because it hurts. Because it hurts to lose, because it hurts us to lose. Right. Now, so one of the cures, like if we're thinking about making ourselves a great investor, you have to create accountability. So why is it that if I'm an options trading firm of some sort, let's say I'm like, Jane Street or something, if I have traders, the ones that don't do well get fired. So what does that mean? That the trader themselves is held accountable to their P&L in a way that's I assume going to make them make money more, make them get better more quickly. So if we can create accountability to the result for ourselves, either because of the environment, like you're managing other people's money, like now you have accountability.
Yes.
It tethers you to reality in a way that it otherwise wouldn't. And I think that that's such an important piece of the process. So even if you're like a one-man shop, right? First of all, find other people to bounce ideas off of where you're doing what I said, right? Let's take out a piece of paper and write down what we think before we say a word to each other. But find other people to help you out. Like I often recommend that like solo portfolio managers pair up because it's very helpful if they don't have a fully built out team. But also you use those other people as an accountability mechanism, right? So maybe you're not in a situation where you're managing other people's money and you're a solo trader. fine, but be accountable to other people. Tell them what the benchmarks are that you feel like you need to meet in order to feel like this is what you should be doing, as opposed to, say, indexing, right? You must create accountability, because accountability is what creates better decisions. It's like, this is the whole point of framing decisions as bad. If I say to you, I think it's 100% that Ukraine is going to win the war, right? And you say, oh, do you want to bet on that? Right now, I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. Maybe they're not 100% in war. Maybe what I really mean is that they're 75% to win the war. And I'm saying it's 100% because that's the side I'm rooting for, or whatever. Right. Yes. So now I have to think about, what does Josh know that I don't know? Like, why is he willing to be on the other side of this belief that I have, where he's willing to put money to it? So that as soon as you say, do you want to bet, we've created an accountability mechanism that's going to now discipline my belief and discipline my confidence and help me with this problem of allowing myself, for example, when I'm losing for 6 months, to believe that it's only luck.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that this sort of thing that we started here, and we have this chat thing, whatever it's called here, where all the people that have joined can chat. That's what it's kind of become. It's become an accountability thing. I think that's what's helped people more than anything else. And it's what's helped me more than anything else. All of a sudden, I've got 1,000 people on here.
Who are holding you accountable.
Yeah, they read my newsletter and they're like, well, what the hell were you talking about with this? I thought you said this and now you got this, right?
Right.
So it's great because it helps hold me accountable, and it helps them hopefully get them accountable for their decision makings too. They got 800 people on there. They're going to throw things at them if they're thinking in a certain way. So it's funny how it's become that, but it's great because it sort of goes with exactly what you're saying. My next thing, and just by the way, in my amateur psychology, I do have a history of family of psychologists and psychiatrists, but in my amateur psychology, I'm a believer that one of the reasons people are willing to sit there, and even though their P&L is negative all the time, I never knew this, but I've learned it in the last 5-10 years of my life, or I believed it in the last 5-10 years of my life because I've witnessed it. There are a lot of people who actually maybe P&L is not their goal. Maybe sympathy is what their goal is,
Sure.
Maybe mommy and daddy didn't give them enough attention when they were growing up or whatever, and they're really just looking for sympathy.
Absolutely.
I see it all the time. People get together and, they talk about how they all have on the same trade and it's losing money, but it's okay. We're all going to be okay because the big day is coming where this trade's going to make us millions of dollars, right? I see that all the time and it makes me sick, and I fade those people and I make money off of it. And that's how I deal with it. But I see that behavior all the time, and it's just sad to me. Really.
Yeah.
It's sad. But so that's that. What I would like to ask you, I'm still on my own personal psychology here and my own personal problems, but how do you deal with it? You have this knowledge, okay, of human being and essentially their weaknesses, right? And why they are making mistakes. Okay. You have this great knowledge of that, and you've taken advantage of that by making money from it. Okay. And now you're doing it a different way where you're trying to help them, and that's great. But how do you go out into the world? You know what I mean? You got to go to Thanksgiving dinner, and I know your family is probably close to you, but you got to go out to the PTA meeting, or you got to go out, you got to deal with these people making these decisions all the time. And you know that the decisions that they're making stupid, and you know why, because you're educated, highly educated in this, and yet you can't get in their face and say, listen, I've got a PhD and what the decision reasons you're making here is stupid, and this is why, because then they're just going to get mad at you and kick you out of the PTA, and that doesn't do anybody any good. This is the life that I live by. How do you do? Psychologically.
I think there's a couple of things. Yeah, you just have to pick your spots. One of the things that let me tell you a story from my time on Celebrity Apprentice to try to explain this. I know this is a very weird segue, but I think
anything.
I think it will help. So I think about different things that I'm doing as different games, and that doesn't mean like playing games with people. Like, it's not a bad word. It's more like there are different rules. This is a different construct. I have different goals, and my job is to play within the rules of whatever this situation is as best as I can. So when I was on Celebrity Apprentice, the first few challenges are just like the team working together. And obviously you're trying to win the challenge so that you don't end up in the boardroom. And so I was quite vocal when I saw that people were making stupid decisions.
Right.
And I think that some of the other contestants found me pushy, to use a nice word for
I
it.
get it.
Because I would just be like, don't make that decision.
I know what you're doing wrong here. Listen to me.
Yes. So let's fix it. So I think they found me in some ways abrasive. So but they also knew that I was raising a lot of money and like the charity component of it. So I'm a little bit of a threat here, and they think I'm abrasive.
Right.
So we get to a challenge where we have to quote unquote run a hotel, and the project manager, who I think was really hoping that I could get voted off the island, so to speak, voted out of Trump Tower, put me, so they had to assign roles for this, like running the hotel thing. And some of those things were very customer facing. So I was assigned to be a bell person and a room service person. And I think their thought was, this woman is so abrasive and she's so like in your face. Clearly she's going to be terrible at these two things. And the customers will hate her. And so then if we end up in the boardroom, it will be really easy for me to get her off the show, to have her get fired. But what she didn't understand is like my approach to things is like, what is this game? Right. So I was playing the bell person game, which is, here's your closet. Is there anything I can do for you? Do you need to get anything? Like so on and so forth. With room service, it was, can I set this up? Where would you like this to be put? Like, oh, your eggs weren't right. Let me go and get those for you. Because it was a totally different, the purpose of what I was doing was different. The goal of what I was doing was different.
Different situation, you adapt to it.
Exactly. So in that situation, I actually ended up being like, I got named the star person on the team for that time. So the tactic backfired. But the reason is that I'm not playing the same game every single time.
Right.
So if I'm playing the PTA game, I'm honestly, my PTA game is mostly, can you stop asking questions so that I can get home? But there's always people who keep asking questions, and I'm like, no, we've already covered it. Can we go
I'm
home?
the same, but it's the same thing. It's right. Still the same. Then they get mad at you.
Yeah. So it's a different game that I'm playing. And again, I don't want to say that means, like, I think that when you say that, people think, oh, you're messing with people. Yeah. You're messing with people, or you're manipulating people, or whatever. Yeah. It's like, it's like with my husband, we have fights where sometimes I think that I'm right, and I don't say it because I'm playing the marriage game, which is how important is it to me to be right? How important is it to him to be right? Does it really matter?
Risk reward.
I should make sure that I'm keeping my capital for times that it really matters to me. And this is going to make our long marriage, hopefully, much more harmonious. And I think that that's totally fine. And that's part of good decision making, is to recognize what your goals are.
Right. No, I think for me, what the best thing you said there was the very beginning, pick your spots. That's the lesson that I have to learn.
Just pick your spot.
Because I get into fights with people about stuff like this, and
where afterwards you're like, why did I do that? Like,
I'm like, why did I even bother? It's not going to change their mind. My wife says it to me all the time. We'll go to Christmas dinner and I'll end up causing everybody to cry. Right.
Right.
And she's like,
and
why?
It's like, what's the point?
Yeah, she's like, why? I'm like, I'm trying to help them, honey. She's like, they don't want your freaking help. You can't help somebody that doesn't want your help. Okay, so just shut up, eat the turkey, and go home.
So I've actually done this before. When so your point about some people just want sympathy, I think that is so insightful and so true. And so I'll be talking to people who are complaining about stuff and whatever, and I have been known to do this often. I will stop them and I will say, I just need to understand, are you just looking for emotional support here, or do you want my opinion and advice? Because I just need to know,
so that be like, whoa,
so that I know what I'm doing here. Now, they'll usually, sometimes they say I want my advice, but then I figure out they don't really. Then you test it with a very light piece of advice. You're like, so what would you think about this? And as soon as they rebuff you, you go, no, they just want emotional support.
So you have the advantage over me with this, because you have, I hate to be sexist, but you have the woman's touch.
So I just say, I'm like, I just need to understand, like, do you want to just bend my ear, which is totally fine. Like, I'm happy to listen to what's going on. Or do you want my advice?
Right.
And it helps me to establish what are the ground rules here. Like, am I playing the sympathetic friend game, which I'm happy to be? I'm actually sympathetic to you. You're sad. Or am I playing the advice giving friend?
Right.
And so that's why, like, at Christmas dinner, I would never be saying to somebody, like, you're completely wrong about this, right? Like, unless it was something really existential. Look, if it's something that if they're saying something that I find abhorrent, I might say something. But mostly I'm kind of, I'm sort of like, what's the point?
Yeah. I mean, the sad part about the fights that I have with that is it's not even something I have a strong opinion of, because what I have trained myself to do is not have a strong opinion on anything. So really all I'm doing is taking the opposite side of what you're saying just to make you see that there is another side to the story. Okay.
Right.
That pisses people off.
Some of that, though, I will say some of that I think is cultural. So you're describing my dinner table when I was growing up, but we were all bought into that.
No, and I've actually said that too. I mean, my wife was raised in an Irish Catholic family, okay, in New England. You know what I mean? They don't do that. I was raised in a Jewish family in New Jersey. We had Thanksgiving dinner, and if everybody wasn't completely hating each other and fighting by the end of the dinner, then we didn't know what the hell we were doing, right?
Right.
So I've actually said that. I'm like, look, honey, you know, this is what it is. You don't invite a Jew to Christmas dinner.
Well, that's the thing. So I will say that's true. Like, and there's even cultures within families. So my dinner table was like yours. If we didn't end up in some knockdown, drag out fight about like geopolitical events, it was a weird dinner. And it was all fine. But not all families are like that. Right. No, so not all dinners are like that. A lot of them are just trying to have small talk, or it's like where it's like Downton Abbey and nobody's ever saying anything controversial.
No, that's right.
You know, and that to each his own. I happen to prefer the former when everybody's bought into the debate, but I don't think that happens all the time. So
no, but this is the thing that I have to. I'm already 56, but I have to grow up and realize it. Just because that's what I prefer, and that's just doesn't mean that that's what everybody prefers, and therefore I don't need to ruin Christmas dinner, right? So now I just shut up. I try to shut up. But you know, it's funny because what I find is, as Mr. Contrarian, right, I'm by definition against what everybody is thinking. So, and this is why I work for myself. Because what I found was, forget about the P&L, right? It's one thing, you're Mr. Contrarian, you're wrong. Oh, well, you're wrong. You lost some money. The worst thing that happens to me is when I'm Mr. Contrarian and I'm right and I make money. Because
people get mad at you.
Then people just get pissed at me. It makes them look stupid. It's like, dude, I just made you money. This is what you hired me to do. I just made money because of that. But it just makes them look stupid and then feel threatened. And then, you know, this is why I stopped working for hedge funds and went to work for myself, because it came about that. And I can't deal with that, you know, so. It's a strange thing. Does it frustrate you, as it frustrates me, to watch people successfully sell into this weakness of human beings? So in other words, there's a bunch of people that will sell into these behavioral weaknesses and make a bunch of money by taking advantage of that, right? Does that frustrate you like it frustrates me? Or just accept it and say that's what people are?
I don't know. I'm trying to think about how to interpret the question.
So this whole thing of, you know,
it doesn't frustrate me when people are trading against somebody's bad decision. Okay, so that's not frustrating to me, because that's actually the definition of poker, right? If you're good at poker, you're trading. That's what you do, right? You're trading against people's bad decision making. What I find, I don't know if the word is frustrating, disheartening. Aggravating. Sometimes makes me rage. I
mean, like I see these people that sell, you know, it's like all the things that when people are selling that people want to do. They don't want to be responsible for their own decision making. They want people. So people selling these like trading signals and all. And I know it's crap. Okay,
of course,
but these people make millions of dollars.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be selling it. They would be trading it.
No, of course.
So and I see this in politics a lot too. You know, like. Just the completely, like, the taking advantage of the weaknesses in human cognition in a way where you know that what you're selling is crap. That it's, I don't get frustrated by that. It makes me angry because I think it's immoral.
It pisses me off.
If and
it's immoral. And I'm not judging how somebody makes their money. People make their money how they want to make their money. Okay,
right?
I get it, but it really does piss me off.
But if you know that what you're selling is a lie, look, there's all sorts of different versions of snake oil sales. And the reason why snake oil salesmen worked really well is because people wanted to believe that there were cures for things that there weren't cures for.
Yes.
And so people who knew damn well that they were selling them a bottle of water or whatever the equivalent of that was, we're giving this to people in a way, you know, where they, you know, I'm sure there was a placebo effect, but it wasn't gonna cure the thing that they thought it was gonna cure, and it was really playing into what people wanted to believe to be true. And it's not.
I even find that people that are snake oil salesmen end up convincing themselves that the snake oil is actually real. Some of them, I believe that some of them do that. They even believe it themselves. They believe their own bullshit.
I think that's probably true, but I think probably less true. I think when you're getting into the people who are selling like the trading signals and things like that, they know it's not true, because otherwise they'd be trading.
Well, they say they are, and they make up false statistics because they don't get audited. They make up all these false statistics, and even if they are real statistics, I make money 85% of my trades. It's because they're really just taking losing trades and adding to them all the way down, which you could never do in real life, but on paper you could, right? And then they bounce a little bit back, and now you're even, and you get out at an even trade, right? But you could never do that in real life because there's not an unlimited amount of capital. Right? Anyway, that's a whole nother story. It pisses me off. It makes me want to be Harry Houdini, who we know, in the last part of his life, he just went around the world trying to expose scams. He was the ultimate scammer, being a magician, so he knew what scams looked like.
But it's different though.
Not a scammer, but he was the ultimate.
This is a really good point. And it's what aggravates me about snake oil is that when you're doing magic, as Harry Houdini was,
right, you're not saying it's real.
You are not saying it's real.
Right.
You are saying, I am going to fool you and it's going to be amazing because you will not believe your eyes, but this is not true.
Right.
I'm fooling you.
Yes.
A medium is telling you that you're talking to the dead.
Right.
Right. I mean, so they are doing magic, but they're selling it as the truth. And that's the thing that's so awful. That's what Harry Houdini was trying to expose. Yes. I really love like Penn and Teller do an act. So they do, in their act, they do things where they're exposing mentalism, for example, right? Where, look, John Edwards can go into a room and be like, I'm feeling an R. This kind of stuff. And people really think he's talking to the dead. And Penn and Teller spend a lot of time like really debunking that kind of stuff.
They do.
So I know they do a trick where, it's like there's a sentence in an envelope and then some, people are grabbing things from under their chair and lo and behold, that thing is in the envelope.
Right.
And they say, we're fooling.
Yes.
It's not true. Because it is so aggravating when people take something that's an art and try to sell it as reality. So that's when you ask me, like, is it frustrating to you? That's the thing that's really frustrating to me is people who are taking advantage of stuff.
Yes. I mean, I don't want to get too into it because I know people get a little bit, about this stuff. But to me, religion, I mean, the people who you want to be religious, I have many good friends who are very religious, but these people who make tons of money off of it, it just, to me, it's the grossest thing there is, and politics for that matter, right? Which in my view, I don't want to get into it, but that's what this is all freaking about, is these people making money by getting people to buy into their politic and religious bullshit so that they can all get rich. Anyway.
Well, I mean, and I think, it's possible to make a distinction between people who are like healers,
right?
Where they're bringing people on stage and like,
your
diabetes is cured through
right. No, it's sick.
That kind of stuff, and sort of what we think of as run of the mill.
So I know we don't have all the time in the world. I promise these people I would try to get you some questions from them. I just want you to know this is not me. Okay, they gave me a bunch of questions. I asked everyone to vote on which one should be asked first.
Okay,
and so I have a list, and of course, I would have gone the complete opposite way, A, and B, the first questions are by far the silliest questions and probably the most entertaining. So if it's okay with you, I will ask you those.
Okay, we'll see. I don't know if I'm entertaining.
And don't answer them if you don't want to. But the first one comes down to, is Phil Hellmuth really that much of an asshole, or does he just act like that to get airtime?
That's a little bit of a complicated question. Phil is what you see on TV.
He is.
But how they're like sort of to the point of does he have a good heart? Like, does he have good intention?
Right.
And the answer is yes.
Okay.
So what I would say is, as with anything in poker, there are people who you see act much more politely, but they're actually assholes. Like they don't have good intentions.
Right.
Phil has very, very good intentions. His inner monologue is his outer monologue.
Right. Well, and personally, for me, those are the people that I like the most in the world.
What you see is what you get with him.
Like Donald Trump, politics aside, and personality aside, the one thing I did like about his politics was he's an asshole and he's not pretending to be anything else. Okay. And if you're voting for him, you're voting for an asshole. Whereas these other people, I feel like, are hiding the fact that they're a bunch of selfish assholes. Right. Anyway, I don't want to get into politics, but for the record, I don't vote for Donald Trump, but that was the one thing I did like about it, Two, do most of these poker players actually have any money? It strikes me that many of them are gambling addicts, which can't be good. It reminds me of traders who overtrade just to have the thrill. It's very bad for P&L over time.
Again, so let me just say, I retired in 2012. So whatever I'm saying about poker is 11 years out of date. I just want to be very clear about that. Look, poker is like anything else. The top percentage win.
Right.
So yes, the majority of people that you playing poker, like long run.
Right.
I think, I think it's like 5% of people who play poker make money. And then the number of people who are making a real living from it is obviously much smaller than that, which is true of anything, right? I mean, that would be true of any trading environment. So poker is no different.
100%. But I mean, people like, from some of the stories that you tell in the books even, right? Okay, these people are good poker players and they're making money playing poker, but they gamble on everything, right? Because they love it. They love the game.
I I was
And that
thinking
can't
about
be
just
good over
poker.
time.
There's lots of people who play poker who are broke because they're doing other things besides poker.
That's what I mean.
For sure. And then there's a lot of people who you see who you think are big winners at poker, but they're actually not winners at poker.
Right.
So that is also true. So you get a lot of those, different combinations of that, but there just isn't anyone who's playing a lot of house games. By house games, I mean, anything that's out on the floor of the casino, because
Right.
they're called house games for a reason, because the house is always, there
Right.
isn't anybody doing those that, you can't fade baccarat.
No, that's right. You can't.
I mean,
yeah, it just struck me as, I've seen, I don't want to get into the names because I don't know them and I just see them on TV, but it seems like they might be good poker players and they might make money out of poker, but the same personality, they're going out and playing, $150,000 golf games and they're going and bet like me. I do what I do.
Now, to be fair, some of those people are very good at betting golf. So
Okay,
some
maybe.
of them are, because that's a skill game, right? So that's not a house game.
Right.
So there are some people who are losing money playing golf, but there's some great poker players who made a lot of money betting golf.
Right.
Because just like anything else, that's just a market. You could be a very bad golfer and you could
Right.
make lots of money
And still make
betting.
money.
Because if you negotiate the right number of strokes aside.
Of course, right. It's all about that, right? It's all about the odds.
Exactly.
Like just like in the market, it's all about what's discounted in, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to decide what the recession is going to be, but the real question is what's discounted in and how to measure that, right? Okay, because like for me, I trade and that's fine. And to this point in my life, I've done a good job of it. But like I don't bet football. I don't go to the casino. I don't do anything. I don't even spend money for that matter because I'm always so worried about it, right? But that was an interesting question. The rest of them, I think we, for the most part, covered cognitive biases and trading and all that. I think we pretty much covered everything. So unless there's something else you can tell us, my two phrases, by the way, that I use the most here, like this is my one phrase: don't trade, fade.
There you go.
Which means I don't try to trade. I just try to make markets to people that are. And my other one is, be wrong, make money, right?
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm wrong. I just want to make money. And I think that's what people, as you say, have a problem with, right? So,
well, I mean, that's,
they'd rather be right and lose money than be wrong and make is what we're finding out.
Yeah. Look, if you're going to be good at anything, whether it's poker or trading, that has as much uncertainty in the environment, as much volatility, you have to get really comfortable. And then there's certain trading strategies, obviously, that where you have even more uncomfortable, because if you're trading the tails, for example,
right.
You're gonna be losing a lot.
Yes.
So it depends on your strategy.
Yes.
What you're doing, but look, if you're playing a strategy where you're going to win the majority of the time, you're probably doing something very close to index. So then you're not really trading anyway. You're fooling yourself into thinking that you're doing something genius when you could actually free up a lot of your time and just go get some, so get in a Vanguard.
No, that's an excellent point.
Right?
That's an excellent point.
I mean, that's the only way.
Yes.
So,
I love it.
Yeah.
Dr. Annie Duke, it has been an incredible pleasure. And again, I am very thankful. I know that you can spend a lot of time with a lot more high-powered people than me and probably make a lot more money with your time than sitting here and chatting with me and giving me some psychological help. But I very much appreciate it. I really do. And I'm going to read, again, people out there, if you have any care about this, any care about not only making more money trading, but any care about how to start to get your decision-making in your life better, you got to read this book. Here, I keep it right here on my desk. It's not just on my desk because I'm doing this interview. It's because I've been referring to this thing almost on a daily basis, right?
Well, thank you.
Thinking in Bets. And I believe Annie also wrote another book that I did not get yet, but I am going to get. What's the second book called again?
Quit: The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away. Also,
Quit. I love it. Quit. She writes a whole book about why the whole thought about quitting that everybody has is wrong. And in fact, quitting a lot of times can be the absolute right thing to do. Right?
Yeah. The thing about that book also is it's incredibly relevant to traders because people are much better on the entry than the exit.
Yes. No, I listened to one little thing about it that you did on YouTube last night. And to me, you could change the name of that book from Quit to Stop Loss.
Yes, exactly.
It's the same exact thing, right?
I want it to be a little bit more in your face with the title, but it's something that investors really, really ought to be reading for themselves because we pay so much attention to the entry. In fact, we'll create shadow book, so on and so forth, really trying to think so hard about the entry. And we don't think at all about the exit. You tell me someone who has an exit shadow book, Yeah. Well, so that's rare.
Yeah.
People aren't looking at what, given that I sold, like, what are all the combinations of what I could have sold out of my portfolio? How would it have performed in these alternative, decision spaces, so on and so forth. Because you're just not naturally tracking the exits. And there's just a whole host of cognitive biases that pile on top of you that make it really, really hard to exit things anyway. So yes. The simple thing is, look, if we were perfectly rational, not taking into account fees, right? What the cost of trading is. Right. But if we were perfectly rational, we would make the exact same decision about whether to hold something as we would about whether we would buy it that day. If we were perfectly rational. But we know that the chasm between what we do with something we already own versus what we would do if we were considering it fresh is like, you could fall into a crevasse, climbing Mount Everest, how big that chasm. Yes. So the book is about trying to bring together those decisions so that they look more similar.
I love it. And I feel like all these things go right back to really what I try to get people to focus on. It's not, hey, what does Jason Shapiro think the market's going to do, right? Try to get people to focus on process, discipline, risk management, process, discipline, risk management. That's it. That's all this is, right? You can think that Jason Shapiro is some market guru and follow all his trades, and A, you're going to be wrong, and B, there's a good chance that if it does work, Jason Shapiro might make money out of it and you might lose money out of it because it's all discipline, process, right? Right. And I think that's the similar message to what you're saying about pretty much everything. Yeah. So I love it. I love it. And I hope that at some point I get to speak with you again, because I'm not trying to blow smoke here. I have an incredible amount of admiration for what you're doing here and the messages that you're giving me, because it helps me formalize what has always been my belief system anyway. And it also helps me feel better, because clearly 99% of the people out there are always telling me that my belief system is ridiculous, which I don't care, because my P&L tells me the story whether it is or it isn't. But it just does make me feel warm and fuzzy that I have an incredibly successful and incredibly intelligent person here telling me that it's okay, Jason, maybe you're not that crazy. So okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
And we hope to speak to you some other time.
All right. Awesome.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
So I just wanted to do a little bit of a sort of a post-game analysis of this Annie Duke interview, because there's so much information in there, I thought. And I'm just looking at it from in terms of like what I'm taking out of it, right? And the main thing that really struck a chord with me was, I think somewhere around the 19.5-minute mark, she talked about data and how she's all for data. But it can be dangerous as well, because it's just like anything else, you can have bias in your data, and you can force it to tell the story that you want it to tell, rather than let it tell the actual story, right? And that can be very dangerous, because if you then believe that, you are relying on that, and you're relying on data that may not be any good. And that struck a chord with me because, as people know, in my trading system, I use the commitments of traders data very extensively, and I have taken that data and through back testing, I have created an oscillator for the look back period of that oscillator has been back tested, and one thing that I know from the back testing is that oscillator can be very unstable over time, in terms of here sometimes during this period it works as a 90-day look back, and this period it works on a 250-day look back. And so what are you going to use, right? And I have always chosen to just keep it steady from where I originally put these oscillators, which was I tried to put them where the best P&Ls were bunched rather than pick some outlier best P&L, because I know that's stupid, but where it was bunched. But I've always known that that's sort of where the weakness in my process is, and I have always in a way justified that by thinking, well, I'm putting an extra layer on top of that, because I'm not just buying when this oscillator says things or people are too short. I'm waiting for a market confirmation in the forms of news failure before I actually execute it. And that's bias right there, right? I'm making myself believe this. Now, in fairness, my P&L has told the story, and it's worked, okay? And even though I set these look-back periods a long time ago, you're talking about over 15 years ago, and they might not be that stable, I have seen no degradation in my, is that the right word? Degradation in my returns over that time period. So this is why I haven't really looked to change it. Right. But, Annie Duke made a lot of good points about just because something might be working, the question is, could it be working better? Are you missing out on better opportunities because of what you're doing? Right. That's also a question. So all these things got in my head. And what I did was this afternoon, I got on the phone with the guy who does my quant work. And we're going to take a whole relook at this whole thing with the COT and the look back periods. And are there more efficient ways that we can use this? And because Annie really set this in my head that, it can be done better. And the data can fool you sometimes. So that's the first thing I took away from this interview for me. The second thing, which is just kind of silly, is that while I love what she has to say, and I think it's genius, you have to then question, do I think that because I agree with it? I mean, it's that whole confirmation bias circle, right? Is what she's saying really great? And is what she's saying really genius? Or is it just that I believe in the stuff that she's talking about? I believed in it before I talked to her. And this just kind of gives me confirmation bias towards that. So it's kind of a little funny, but again, doesn't matter that much to me because my whole thing is I measure myself based on P&L. And I do that a lot. And I look at my P&L a lot, and I'm trying to make sure that it's falling within expectations when I go into some kind of losing period. Is it a normal losing period, right? Is it an expected losing period based on, I don't have to just do back tests because I've been managing money this way for a long time. I can look at over 20 years of data and see is it falling outside of that expected range of returns. But I just think it's kind of funny that the circle that all this, biasness goes into, right? It's just like she talked about, you want to take away bias so you look at data, but then you can use the data and you can be biased anyway. It's a very weird thing, but anyway, something to think about. I hope everybody enjoyed that interview. I hope everybody learned something from that interview. I think, like for me, I picked up that whole thing about, it just clicked with me, the whole thing about the data and that you can be doing something wrong with it or that you can be doing something better with it that you might be missing, even if what you're doing is working. But I think there's something for everybody in there, no matter where you are in your journey with trading, no matter how you trade, if you're a systems trader, if you're a discretionary trader, whatever you are. I think there's something to be learned from everyone in there, personally. So again, hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk again very soon. Thank you.
Subscribe to Crowded Market Report by Jason Shapiro.